Cool. Welcome to episode 17 of WP Dev Table. Today we're doing a talk on WordPress API, course and book with Josh Pollock. If you haven't seen WP Dev Table before, it's a roundtable discussion with WordPress developers. We talk all things geek and hopefully educate you on a few things. Joining me today are our usual guest hosts. If you'd like to ask our usual hosts. If you'd like to ask any questions, use the hashtag on Twitter, hashtag AskWPDevs. So I've got Jason and Tom with me. So introduce yourself, boys. We'll start off with Tom.
Hey, what's up? I'm Tom. I'm in New York, WordPress developer at Alley Interactive. What's up, Jason?
What's up, Tom? Bronson, Josh. Welcome, Josh. I'm a web developer also based in New York. So we got a lot of time zones represented here. And then I do WordPress development, really helping small businesses accomplish their goals month over month by achieving, whatever they request. Josh, why don't you take a little bit of an intro for yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Al. I used to live in New York City, but I was not a web developer at the time. Now I live in North Florida. I make WordPress plugins, calderaForms. It's a drag-and-drop responsive form builder. It's different than the other ones that are out there. It's neat. I hope you try it. And I also have been working on Ingot, which is an automated A/B testing plugin for WordPress. So it's all self-contained in WordPress itself, and it's optimized to work on any WordPress site, no matter what your traffic level is.
Awesome. Cool. So our first question for you is, how did you get into WordPress?
By accident.
I think that's how we all got into it somehow.
Right, yes. Well, no, that's the thing, and I like to put, I feel like we have these conversations that start with, but I don't have the computer science background, but you must. It's like, no, there are three of us that have a computer science background. Right, so I got into WordPress the normal way, which was I was going to a hippie college to get my degree in environmental studies, and I started writing a blog about being a nerd. And I randomly used WordPress.com, which I didn't know was a thing before I was Googling alternatives to Blogger, which sucked. And when I started Googling how to do things with WordPress.com, it became clear that the answer was you had to have your own blog, right? And your own host. And that blog wasn't very good, but I found much more fun hacking the theme than writing for it.
Cool.
Now I'm here. At some point, Scott Kingsley Clark from Pods hired me to do support. And that sort of put me on the trajectory to being a professional at this.
Very cool. And what was that about? When did you kind of walk the plank, so to speak?
So that would be around 2013, I guess.
Cool.
So I've been doing this in one way or another, starting with theme customizations and working at Pods. And then there was a time where I thought I was going to make themes, and then the fact that I have no design sense in the slightest.
Okay, kind of need that.
What's
Right.
that furry thing that you're throwing around?
Plugins. Plugins make sense.
Josh, what's that furry thing you're throwing around?
This is my work cat. This is Shy. She's my
Trouble.
boss. She's in charge here. I work to keep my computer warm so she can nap on it.
So when I was working from home all the time, I found that my cat would always just sit on my hands on my keyboard whenever I started getting into that flow state. Does that happen with you too?
No, because my computer's here, which you can't see because it's above, right? Like a laptop that's closed, and so it gets warm, and so she just sleeps on there. My Twitter background is her asleep on. If you invite Josh Forum too, if you look at the Twitter profile background, it's her asleep on my computer. So that's the point of the operation. I write code so she can have a warm nap.
At least you're pet friendly.
Yeah. No, she yells if I'm downstairs when I should be at work. She'll yell at me.
Cool. So with calderaForms, how did that start? When did you start development, and what made you kind of want to scratch the itch to create a form builder plugin?
Oh, so interesting. This is the thing, is I didn't. David Kramer started calderaForms about not a full year, but about a year before we started working together. I know him through Pods. That's sort of the thread through my life. And I was working on a big web app I never finished. That was kind of fatally flawed sort of project you learn a lot from. But and it was based around Pods, and Pods has this built-in form builder, totally code, not a UI form builder.
Okay.
That works, but it's limited. And so when I was running into both limitations of what it could do and also just the interface, I said to David, like, hey, your form builder is really neat. I'd like to use it as the front end for this web app. Like, I already have all of the classes to put the code into the application, but I just want to have a cool interface that's responsive in Ajax. I don't have to figure out how all that works. Can I do that? And the first thing we actually collaborated on was this add-on that we call Run Action that just runs an action that exposes an array of all of your data. And it was built towards people like me who didn't know calderaForms, but like the interface. We're like, this is neat. Like, it works real well for people. And I could just shove that array into whatever. And that was something he built real quick one night. We were talking in Pod Slack, or IRC. This is before WordPress got Slackified. And so that's really the start. Like, I came in as a fan. And for him, it's one of those just nerd challenges of like, oh man, that's like a cool project. Like everybody's sort of tackled the WordPress form builder, and like either like made a form builder plugin, or they've like made that class to make a form. They're like, shoot, like if I have to write an HTML form one more time, it like starts building their own, like, oh man, I'll like make a class that makes a like text thing, and then like I'll extend it, make a select, and then like I'll make a processing, and then you go overboard, right? And then you just screw it, I'll use something else that already exists.
I don't want to maintain this.
Right. We're those guys who like are up to the talent. It's it's been really fun to get involved in something that somebody else started. Like I probably wrote 10% of it at this point, but we've gone from like less than 1,000 users when they first started tracking active installs to it's over 10,000 now. So it's been great to get people like on board and like say like people, I know you should use calderaForms for that. Like when I see that on Facebook and some of the Facebook groups, I'm like,
And how do you guys tackle feature requests and support and things like that?
You don't.
It's hard. I mean, look, we don't take support on WordPress.org. I don't think it's sustainable for a business. And some people tell me I'm wrong, and my answer to them is WordPress SEO by Yoast, right? Right? Like, you go get their README. It says, we don't answer support. You want support? Buy it. And there are some, like, every now and then I get an angry, because we have a support form.
Yeah.
But I wrote an add-on that's like, checks if the current user has a licensed product in EDD. Right? Our EDD add-on doesn't do checkout. That's all it does, right? Because that's what I needed it for. Eventually it'll get around to doing EDD checkout. But people will be like, your support forms work. But no, it's not. You read the instructions. It says you have to log in and have everything in there. I'm like, a few people like get really mad about it, and I get that because people have this expectation of everything's free in WordPress, and I don't get paid to work for WordPress.org. I do a lot of stuff free for the community, but me spending over many hours a day, it's just not sustainable doing free support there, and it's a bad interface. So it's tricky. We try to return these our paying customers, and feature requests are. It's important to be doing support when you start a company because you find out what's wrong with your product. People start asking, like, how do I do this? And you're like, it doesn't do that. And they keep asking your questions.
You learn so much, don't you? Because people use your product in different ways you never thought of.
Right. It's absolutely great when people ask you a question and you're like, oh, man, give me a week. Like, it'll do, like, that'll be, it'll know how to do that in a week. That's amazing. I don't know. It's tricky. Right now we're just using a straight up, use a calderaForm that sends us an email. We'll see. It's fun being in business. We've been doing it for almost a year now, so it's time to start figuring out where to go from here. Like, it's been a good start. Like, we're in a position to be successful, I think.
Where do you find that most of your users come from? Are they people that are picking their first Forms plugin, or are they people coming from other plugins like Ninja Forms, Gravity Forms, etc.?
I think it's split. I think the WordPress user base grows really rapidly, right? Because so many people are like, hey, I'm going to make a website for my business, right? Or I'm going to start a business and I'm going to make the website, right? That's what's running a huge portion of the growth in WordPress. And so a lot of people, like, this is the one that they fit their needs, somebody told them for. And then, we have plenty of people who are saying, hey, I was using Gravity Forms, or I was using, whatever forms, formidable forms. And I tried this because somebody said something and it was great. Those are actually trickier for us because I've used Gravity Forms like 3 times. And like, no disrespect, like I just never really needed because of what I was doing. I was always doing pods development, and then like I don't know, calderaForms was my thing. And so people say like, oh, in Gravity Forms you can do this. How do you do that in calderaForms? Like, I have no idea. I've like edited somebody else's forms a few times. Seems nice. I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, I'm a big Gravity Forms user. I've been using it for years and years, pretty much since I realized that Contact Form 7 didn't have database entries. So I was just like, okay, I got to move.
That was pretty much what switched me as well. Yeah.
So
you're gonna have a backup.
Right, exactly. Yeah, if your email's down, you don't get a contact form. That's a problem. So
no, that's not. Honestly, I've tried it once. AmadoOS made this cool Contact Form 7 into the customizer add-on, and I was like, oh, I want to check that out. But like, I've never used custom Contact Form 7, so it's like I don't know how to use this.
Yeah, I mean, I've used Gravity Forms a lot. I've looked into Ninja Forms. That seems great too.
Yeah, it is good.
I'm curious. You say that calderaForms is a different kind of WordPress form builder. What do you mean by that?
I mean, it's the drag and drop interface in terms of being responsive. I don't know if you've tried it, but it's a grid. Like you're making a grid. So you add a row, split it, divide it, drive it around, and so then it's just responsive from day one. The way that the processors work is differently, right? And the whole thing being like the conditional system is drag and drop. It's all very visual. Everything's like the database entries is by default. The AJAX processing is by default. The emails is by default. Everything that you would need to get started is free, right? So when you need a payment processor like MailChimp, right, those are add-ons. But it's a different way of using the admin to build visually your form, and the fact that it's responsive using Bootstrap from just out of the box.
Cool. So if you're not, what if your theme is not using Bootstrap? So then you kind of got Bootstrap and whatever else might be loaded.
Right. I mean, you can you can override it. Like we have a example on how to use Foundation for your responsive. It's a name prefixed version of Bootstrap, right? So we took a Bootstrap download and prefixed it and pulled out all the stuff we didn't need. So it's pretty lightweight.
Cool. So why don't you give us a little bit about Ingot? I know that's pretty new.
Yes, Ingot is very new.
I'm definitely curious to hear about the path to it. Was it something that was more of like a customer need, or was it something internal need?
It was a combination of internal need and fascination, and then seeing that this wasn't a thing that existed and becoming. Like I'm really excited by this, and so probably the earliest prototype of it was a few lines of code in the functions.php on calderawp.com, where I was running really unscientific price tests. Where I would just like write some filters into EDD's pricing, and then for a week, and then turn them off, and then compare. Right, that was my super scientific A/B testing method. But like, there isn't a great way of doing A/B testing in WordPress. Right. The third-party service works really well with e-commerce plugins and is all integrated into the dashboard. Anybody can do it. And so that was our goal, was to put it all in the dashboard, make it super easy to use. It's literally like choose what type of test you want to run. Do you want to have like a button where we change the text? Do you want to just have a straight up link with you change the text? Do you want to have a button where the text is the same but the color changes, right? So really right now we're focusing on call to actions. We're about to add a new feature that will change text, and then it'll register a conversion when you get somewhere. So a specific page, or you add a product to the cart with EDD or WooCommerce, or you buy something, right? So that's a conversion. So it's like, we're using it right now, testing it on ingothq.com, where the top headline changes. There's 4 different options. So and then when you add it to the cart, that's a conversion. So we're doing that kind of thing just to, A/B testing is so big, and for, a business like Ingot, we've been going to like WordCamps and asking people, like, how do we describe this? right? Do we call it an A/B testing framework? Do we call it the self-evolving website? That's what I wanted to call it, right? Everybody, when I said that, looked at me like I was crazy, so we stopped doing it. I wanted to call it self-optimizing. Matt Cromwell told me that made it sound like a caching plugin, but we're right now we're trying to scale the business out. We're starting to think about how are we going to do like pay-per-click ads, and I'm going to have, A/B testing there, and I'm going to have it in. I want that to integrate with WordPress, right? Mm-hmm. I want it to match up if they were, if I'm testing 3 different creatives with different colors. I want that to, whichever color they picked, I want that to be, reflected in my on the site when they get there. I want the message that, if we're trying 3 different ways of describing something, I want to describe it the same way when they click through on a pay-per-click, right? So that's sort of my next project. And this is the WordPress as the center is what's really interesting to me. I feel like WordPress started as very self-contained, and that was like, hey, you own your own data, you control everything. And then we all went, SaaS is great. And so we integrated with all these third-party SaaS services, which sometimes makes sense, sometimes doesn't. But WordPress should be at the center, because we don't work for Facebook. We work for the site that we built for WordPress on our WordPress site. And so when we use social media to draw people in, use ads to draw people in, but WordPress stays the center, we control our data, and we have more ability to affect the rest of the world with that. And that's really what's exciting to me about Ingot. I mean, it's a neat challenge, right? Playing with an A/B testing algorithm and making it work so, right, if you look at Optimizely, you can run that for 2 weeks and be like, yeah, to really know what to do, we're going to need 100,000 more views. This is a lot of the feedback that I've gotten on Optimizely, and I see, based on the way their algorithms work, that makes sense. And I went down that path for about a week trying to recreate that type of algorithm before I went out and realized, like, this is silly. There are better ways of doing this.
How long did it take you to develop? From idea to, say, like, MVP, the first time where you're like, cool, let's launch this.
A few months.
Okay.
I definitely, it's hard, it's funny because in the last, like, week before we launched it, I threw out about a third of it. And so that seems like a big waste, but, like, I don't think I could have written it as well if I hadn't have written it wrong the first time.
Yeah.
Right? I screwed up the data structure. I screwed up the way in which we were going to do the calculation. I spent, like, this week on a bad, right? Because, like, the beta used a really dumb algorithm. It was like, just run it 10 times and then start the next one, right? Because it was like, just make the rest of it work and then we'll put the algorithm. But then when I went to, like, write the actual algorithm, I, like, spent a week on something silly that didn't make any sense. And it's one of those things where, as a developer, you have to, like, trust yourself that you wouldn't have done a good enough job. You couldn't have done it right if you didn't spend a bunch of time doing it wrong, and that's frustrating. But that's what it takes.
Yeah.
For the display, is it being smart about what version of a test it's displaying over time, like as it gains data and a level of confidence?
Yeah. So over time, it starts out totally random, and it does that. If it's been run, it'll do that based on your average sessions, right? Figure out this period of just random, totally, completely random. And then once it's gotten past that point, then it's going to start getting smarter about it, where most of the time it's going to choose the highest conversion rate. And every 33% of the time, then it goes random, just to mix the data, right? Because if you didn't go random, it would never try certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts out totally random so it can get a good basis. And that's, it runs at the amount of times that you give traffic you get average in a week, or 1,000, whichever one's greater, or whichever one's lower. And so at least 1,000, if not your average. And then after that, it chooses the best one. So that way, it's going to get automatically to you. You don't need to, like, go back and figure it out. You don't need to look at, like, we have a little graph there, which is good because you can do a little bit of human correction on this. But you don't need to go back and do the analysis. You don't need to look at it and figure out what you should have chosen. Because over time, it's going to be able to figure out, okay, well, this is totally abysmal and anormal, right? This is way too many standard deviations from the mean. Forget it. But it's going to be trending towards the better ones once it gets past random. But it's still going to put in a little bit of randomness just in case.
Do you think multivariate tests are something that you'll add support for in the future?
Oh, it is multivariate.
Okay.
One of the things that we've tested so far is that nobody knows what multivariate is unless you're a web developer. So we call it an A/B testing framework. It's It's multivariate by design. I mean, you can put in 2 variants and now you're doing A/B testing, but it is multivariate by design.
Now, is it just within the actual content, or can you do it such that you could set up a test, so to speak, that has, let's say, multiple templates? So like you have for example, landing pages, right? So you want to test out certain landing pages. You set up the same copy on the landing page, but the templates are different. Can you do that?
So right now that's not a feature, but it's something that we've definitely thought a lot about. And the framework itself is very abstract, right? The underlying, right? So there's just one function to register an iteration and one function to register a conversion. So as a developer, you could make that pretty easily, right? Just run a filter on whatever to switch out templates. That's something like we'd like to get it to the point where it's like every stage of the sales funnel is a test, right? Where we sort of do the first step, do the second step. That's something that we're going to. But one of the things that was very important to me is that I knew that I was going to have people saying like, hey, what about this? And oftentimes I would be, like, people ask me questions, I'm like, yeah, I would never make that a feature, but you could do it, and here's how. And I think that's important with WordPress plugins, and that's sufficiently abstract. And I know you guys wanted to talk about the REST API, and I think that's one of the things that is exciting about the REST API is, right, there's a PHP function that you can call in Ingot register conversion. You pass it the ID of the variant, and it registers a conversion. But there's also an API endpoint there, right? And which is wrapped around the same function. But it's really neat that I can say to somebody, okay, just pass these parameters to the endpoint.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And because saying to somebody, hey, here's this PHP function, or use this hook, right? I mean, that's a level of specialization that might not seem like much to us, right? Like, we have jobs because we know that. Like, that's not a thing. But that's not a common thing to say to somebody, oh, use this hook. Figure out where do you put this PHP function, right? I do support for WordPress plugins, and I say, you can use this hook, you do this function. Like, which file in the plugin do I modify? No! Right? Nobody knows that, right? Like, that seems insane to me. But it's not. And so I love the idea of I'm making a plugin that the REST API that it serves isn't something that's bolted on later. It's not an addition, right? I wrote the CRUD specifically abstract because I knew I was going to be wrapping REST API endpoints about it. Because I knew that my admin, right, the admin for this, is an Angular app.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Totally custom API endpoints is the only way it interacts with WordPress. And the thing that's hooked to add menu page is a few lines of HTML. Like, that's the callback. That's it. And it's wonderful. This is the subject of my talk in WordCamp Miami, by the way. Is right, they're doing this deeply learning JavaScript day, which ironically has very little to do with learning JavaScript deeply. It has to do with learning frameworks, so you don't have to learn JavaScript deeply. Which I think is a problem. I think that everybody's questioning, like, oh, I should learn JavaScript deeply. Which framework? Is like...
So, yeah, based on that, it sounds like Angular's your preferred framework, yeah?
Yeah. Do you know why? Because I understand JavaScript and HTML5. I don't want to learn Facebook's version of it.
Yeah. That's fair enough. And how do you use the REST API in calderaForms too? Same similar thing?
No, okay. Not yet. I think that it will... calderaForms is still processing against a custom, endpoint, like you would traditionally. I mean, we're not using like admin Ajax or anything barbaric like that. But it's funny. In the next the version that we're almost done with, we were trying to figure out what was the best way to have the API endpoint work no matter what the permalinks were, and we just went and ripped off how the function REST URL works in the REST API, right? Because it's really neat. Like, we were like, hold on, their thing is bulletproof, and it must work. And we just went there and we're like, that's pretty smart. Like that the way that they figured out when they should use query string instead of /wp-json is really smart.
Yeah.
Look in the function. Well, REST URL calls get REST URL.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. Look inside a REST URL and for whatever that calls, the multi-site version. And then look in there. It's kind of neat. It's like 5 or 6 lines. So I would assume that calderaForms sooner than later will be based around the REST API. The great thing about Ingot is it's brand new, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Epoch, the live commenting plugin I built for Postmatic, we started that 8 months ago, and I made an argument for it should require the REST API, and it just didn't make sense at the time. And so I wrote a custom API for it, for all the Ajax there. The great thing about writing Ingot was I was like, we'll just require WordPress 4.4. We don't have any current users to alienate, right?
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Because with launching this new plugin that's making such heavy use of the REST API, are you requiring 4.4, or are you shipping your own version bundled of the API in there for back and pat?
No, I mean it just requires WordPress 4.4. It would some clients that I've worked with, this has been a concern, and so it's had to be bundled, which is bad, but like I get it. You can't. This concerns me in calderaForms, right? What happens if we start using the REST API as a requirement for it? The good thing about Ingot is it's all custom routes, so it doesn't require the plugin. It's just 4.4. And I think that, for a new, most likely when somebody's picking up a plugin, like a big plugin to add to their setup, it's because they're doing a new site or they're doing a site rebuild. So it's not a concern to me with Ingot because we don't have the legacy users. It's a concern to me with calderaForms because people have reasons not to upgrade their sites, right? They're reliant on something or they're afraid of something, right? They have like a real reason or a fear.
So what? A step back, I guess. What got you really interested in the WordPress API? You literally wrote the book on it, and what made you say, you know what, this is what I'm going to attach myself to, and I'm going to go in it?
Ryan and Rachel and Nathan is the short answer. WordCamp Milwaukee 2014 accepted me to speak, which was unique at the time. It's a really wonderful thing that they did. Nobody had ever asked me to speak at a WordCamp. The other really lucky thing they did is they scheduled me against Chris Coyer, so nobody was in the room when I bombed. I've gotten much better at WordCamp talks. But I went to hang out with some people before the event, before the speakers dinner. And I met Ryan and Rachel, and they told us a little bit about it. I was like, oh, this is so neat. And I went to their introductory talk that was really, really cool, and I was like, oh man, this is gonna be great. And then Nathan's talk. He said that the two most important things are the REST API and then the Fields API that Scott's been working on. And I know, Tom, you've been helping him out with that a bit. And Fields API, by the way, the fact that this isn't a priority yet to the extent where we don't go back in time and do it in 5 years ago is a little Fields API should be a massive priority because it would be wonderful if we could just assume that a plugin has support for the Fields API, and I can say, let's say I was making a new UI system built around a REST API. Let's call it not Calypso, let's call it Calypso. And so I wanted to install that on my WordPress blog. That would be really neat until I was like, oh, what about the meta box for this plugin? Right? But there's no standard for meta boxes. But wouldn't it be neat if I could write for this fictional thing called Calypso, I could write an abstract, React module to connect to the WordPress Fields API. Except for nobody traveled back in time and built that into WordPress 5 years ago. Problem. So anyway, that was a diversion, but it's a problem. So Nathan made the point, and he explained why the REST API was going to be big and why this was exciting. And I had been working with pods for a while. When I came on with pods, the sort of situation was, looks neat, I don't know how to use it. And the reason nobody knew how to use it is that the documentation was basically non-existent and it was all out of date. Right? It was all pods 1.0, and the syntax was that they were that all that code was using was deprecated. So I just when I first looked at the REST API, I went, this is awesome. I just got done with the whole educating people about pods. So it was just kind of natural to me. And yeah, and I also saw it as like, oh, I could be that guy. Like now he's like, yeah, Josh, he's the REST API guy. I'm like, okay, cool, that worked. Like it was intentional. I saw it as an opportunity to do something good for the community that would help get my name out there really well. Like those are great win-win situations.
So when you were starting to do that, was your real jump into the deep end by writing articles on Torque, and did that kind of lead into writing the book?
Yeah. So the just writing. I mean, I thought I didn't realize this was going to be a big. Like I wanted to write a lot about it, but I wasn't exactly sure how much further it was going to go than the first two. Like I read a 2-part introduction to the REST API, right? That was sort of my first thing, and I didn't think it was going to go that much further. But they got really good traffic, and nobody else had been writing about it. Right? There was like, I don't know, look at that WordCamp presentation Ryan gave. Was your alternative? And for me, it was really fun to like, in this whole thing. Like, I've just like been diving into source code and figuring out how it works. Like honestly, that's what I need to write about next: is how to dive into source code and figure out how it works, because it's an important skill and people don't do it enough, and it's silly, right? We think about the GPL in terms of redistribution, which is our right, but the most important right there is the ability to understand the code that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
And for us as developers, that's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And so I've just been diving into source and figuring it out. And then the book came about because Marie, who's the editor at Torque, said, hey, Josh, can we compile this into a book? And I said, yes, but a lot of it's out of date. And we're missing this, this, and this. And she said, okay, well, what if we paid you to update the stuff, update the old articles, and write the places you think are missing, and then we'll edit it up into a book and lay it out and give it away for free. That's amazing. Like, yeah. Good people at Torque, which is WP Engine, its blog, they're awesome. Like, they're not just really nice people, but they do good stuff for the community like this. Like, they're awesome. And this was just, they came at me like, hey, do you want to do this? And I said, that sounds wonderful. I've always wanted to do something like that. But if I'd done that, I would have had to like hire an editor and hire a layout person. Instead, they did that, and they like compensated me for my time. Like,
that's awesome.
That's wonderful.
And from there, you've diversed into a bit of a WordPress API course as such. So tell us a little bit more about that.
That is almost done.
Cool.
I spent a lot of time yesterday recording WordPress plus Angular front end stuff, which is so I'm not like I'm the last person you would ever want to hire to build a website. And, but like
said here first.
No. I don't do that. Like that's not a thing I do. Like my clients are all people who are making plugins or websites and need like very specific functionality, right? Yeah. Like some sort of custom. Like, hey, I need to make WooCommerce do this, or I need to make, pods do, mainly pod stuff, or like I have this weird challenge, and so I'll build them a plugin. And it contractually, I will say, I will not make this look nice. I will sprinkle it with CSS selectors that somebody else can make it look nice. I'll put the data out in the correct order. But working with Angular makes me kind of want to make websites.
Cool.
It's like I'm doing in my REST API course, about a quarter of it's in Angular. Yep. And I'm just doing like, here's how you would have a list, and then here's of posts and from 2 different sites, which is really neat, right? Because you just like that's a great way potentially to solve scaling problems, right? One of the problems with scaling in WordPress is that PHP can only do one thing at a time, right? Yeah. Like PHP does a thing and then does another thing and another thing. But you can have 2 different sites that you're pulling into the same front end. One custom post type on one and the other. Now it can do 2 things. So Angular and the UI router in Angular, right? Angular traditionally had an NG router, and now there's the UI router. UI router is the most beautiful thing in the world. It has multiple states. Like you could have multiple views in the same document across different, but it's one state. So you could potentially have like a header of a main content, sidebar, and footer state, and so it would only change if it needed to.
Yeah, really wow. Cool. I don't even use the NG router, and you're like, it seems okay, but that sounds really, really cool.
The UI router is vastly superior.
Awesome.
But yeah, so the course is was something that I always kind of wanted to do, but I wasn't sure about, and then I did a webinar for WP Engine, that like a an insane amount of people signed up for it. I was like, I got to make a course. And it's almost done. People are like bugging me. I said by the end of January, it's almost done. I'm a little busy. But I should be there by the end of January. It's almost recorded, and it's going to start with like what's a REST API and what does that mean in WordPress, and like how to use the WordPress HTTP API to make requests and get and post requests, how to use jQuery Ajax, authentication basics, custom routes, extending the defaults, and then plugging this all into Angular.
So it's like more of a I guess a beginner type course to get used to it. Yeah.
It's a beginner course. I mean, it assumes that you could make the HTTP API and WordPress work, and that you can, you understand jQuery Ajax. Right. And the beautiful thing about Angular is that if you understand jQuery, like Angular should be easy, right? It's a simpler implementation of Ajax, and it's it's a little, if you've never used an MVC framework before, it can be a little tricky in terms of getting your head around that, I guess. But it's pretty neat, and as I said, I made a sarcastic comment at the expense of React. I'm getting ready for WordCamp Miami, because WordCamp Miami is going to be, as far as I can tell, just a line in the sand between the React people and the Angular people, right? But I'm convinced that I'm convinced that React was written to reprogram developers' minds into being Facebook developers. Like, there's a great article on Medium on don't use that weird JavaScript CSS framework they developed. That was like, this was built to solve Facebook's problem. Don't use it. It's insane. It's like a JavaScript library for writing CSS. And I'm convinced that's, like, I've never used React, so I could be speaking totally out of ignorance and wrong here. But the beautiful thing about Angular is that you write HTML. There's nothing syntactically wrong with an Angular view, right? You write your template, and you're writing HTML, and you're using an HTML5 data attribute. And it's very clean. There's no logic there. And it just works. It makes sense. Anybody who has a basic understanding of web development should be able to look at Angular and say, okay, that basically makes sense, right? You write a class the same way that you've always written a class, right? Yeah. In React, if you want to add a class, you have to like camel case it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you can't write class. There's some other declaration for it. And that's not really in an HTML file. That's in the callback of a JavaScript function. I'm like,
have either of you guys written in React?
I've messed around with it.
Okay.
I have. Yeah, it's different. Like, I understand why they do what they do. There's also a school of thought that React is going to be the new way that people learn, because essentially there's no abstraction between your HTML, JavaScript, and JS. It's all in one thing. So if you're learning, you sit down, you learn basically there's 3 languages in one. So it's probably going to be a difficult barrier to entry for new people, but I can understand the kind of logic behind it. It is fast, too.
The separation as a concerns is a great principle of software design that I don't think we'll go back on. And I mean, we're WordPress developers, so one of the things that's great about the REST API, I think, as a plugin developer, is it's forcing separation as a concern of products in a way that, go and read the REST API. It's really, really well written in the way that like custom routes work. All routes, but like you're looking at the defaults, or you're writing your own. Like, here's where you deal with sanitization. Here's where you declare the data types. Here's where you deal with validation. Here's where you deal with permissions. It's not right. We've all written these like massive conditionals, like if is set, this is set, and this is like greater than 0 absent, and this is valid, and like this is in this array, and like for 7 hours of. Which you have to, right, in certain situations. And then you're like directly shoving, right at that point, then you're like sort of sanitizing or directly shoving things into get post meta, and that's all perfect, and then somebody else comes along and just shoves the wrong type of thing into that meta key, because you never registered it, right? Who registers post meta?
Unrelated, but since you've done a lot of diving into the source code and whatnot, I have a specific question for you with the API.
Okay, line 723.
Yep, that's what I thought. So, say I have a service and it consumes JSONP. Is there a way for me to go and make the endpoint in WordPress deliver JSONP and have like a callback?
Yes, I believe there's a specific filter for it. I don't know what it is.
723, right?
Yeah, it's in there. It's probably in server WP REST. I mean, there's only like 4 classes in the whole thing, 5 classes in the whole thing. If you ignore the defaults, there's WP REST server, WP REST request, WP REST response, which extends WP HTTP response, and then yeah, so it's like 4 classes. So in there, it's in one of those. Cool. WP includes /REST API, dude. It's somewhere in there. Yeah, it's built in. I've never used JSONP. I like lightly understand the point of it.
I don't really. I just know that the thing I'm integrating with needs to consume JSONP.
Yeah, so look at it. It's in there.
All right.
I know that it's in there. Daniel Bouncer is probably the best person to ask that of.
Will do. Cool, thanks.
Well, now that, do we all get a piece of that pie now? That invoice?
Cool. So how excited were you when the infrastructure finally got into core, Josh?
I mean, it's a weird thing, right? Like that. This was something that, and this is what's beautiful about the REST API is like this isn't a thing that Automatic needed. Like WordPress.com has no need for this, right? They already had their own API that worked well for them, right? It still does. And it's really neat that companies like Human Made and Rachel was working at 10up at the time that this started, and now she's at what? That cool. It's such a neat site. I like that. It's
Wirecutter.
Wirecutter. That's a great site. Yeah. That was like that's one of the benefits of being a developer. Is every now and then you're like, oh my god, I know the person who made that, right? But it's neat that companies like that who just had a need for this, right, just built it. It's a real validation of the our community that it happened that way. So I was pretty excited to see it. I mean, it felt unavoidable. It was weird that like nobody on the core team besides like Jake was ever like really talking about it.
Yeah.
In support. But it wasn't like it was neat that it just kind of happened organically.
Yeah.
And but then it was like, hold on, are we doing this? But yeah, it was exciting. And I like the fact that they've taken the extra time to get the defaults right. There's been a lot of movement and a lot of like backwards compatible breaking changes over the last few months on the defaults that are like annoying, but wonderful because once it's in core, then it's going to be hard to fix. And so that campaign, that crowdfunding campaign for WP Clear REST, has freed Daniel to do a lot of extra work on the REST API period. And there's been a lot of I see all those PRs coming in. There's a lot of good stuff happening there, a lot of smart stuff to do it right. So it's taken way longer than anybody expected.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the decision that they went, well, we can't throw it all in at once, so let's just go with infrastructure. At first, I was like, don't really get it. And like, no, this is actually really cool. And obviously, yeah, we know the new embeds feature is all powered by that, so it's the only endpoint that's registered in core at the moment, and we all can add our own, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, that was Ryan was saying that was probably what's going to happen for a long time. I mean, Ryan's just one of those smart people who like sees things ahead of all the rest of us.
Oh yeah,
and like the ticket that led to term splitting that eventually allowed term meta to happen that he opened when he was like in 12 or
11, I think. Yeah.
Like we all did the math. Because when I met him, it was like a year or two before that got closed. It was like a year before that got closed. I met him, and he was complaining about the fact that when he came to the States, he couldn't get served at a bar.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm over 18. I should be allowed alcohol. And I was like, oh, you're 20 years old, dude. Deal with it. And then I saw that. I started doing the math. I was like, oh, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm lucky to work with him in the office every day, so if I get stuck, I've got a good guy to go to.
He's fabulous. I was reading the article on the Gaussian blur.
Oh yeah.
I was like, okay, that's smart stuff.
It's awesome. Yeah, really cool. So what do you think will change once the endpoints get into core?
I mean, I'm not a front-end developer, right? So for me, I've already got everything I need, right? Just to be honest, like I'm a plugin developer, and so for me, I can build a plugin around the REST API, right? I can have a custom API, and I can have like I can't tell you how wonderful it is. Like when we realized we needed to do stats in the admin for Ingot, Roy Sivan, who's helping us out a lot on UI stuff, said, I need, like, what do you need? And I told him, and he was like, that's great, Josh, but like none of these endpoints exist. Like none of this data is available. And I was like, give me a half hour. And I just added a couple custom endpoints. Boom, there. So as a plugin developer, I'm happy. I think that, enterprise level developers, people who have been using this forever, right? I mean, this has sort of been the way that people build websites and fallbacks for non-JS and pre-rendering for bots and these sorts of things. So I think that when I discover the other 50 hours in the day, I'm going to develop.
Tell me first.
Like Genesis, like the Genesis equivalent of the REST API front end, right? I don't think that reverse engineering themes using the REST API is possibly the best idea. I think that the expectation of what a WordPress theme is so set that it's going to be tricky to do that, and I think that this is an opportunity to say the WordPress theme is really a good idea for when it was created. And I think this is an awesome opportunity to have a different presentation layer in WordPress. And I use Genesis as an example because, I think the marketing for Genesis is like WordPress but better. And Genesis is not the only way to do a really good WordPress front end, but like they do deliver. Like Genesis is good stuff, right? But beyond that, they have created this very easy to get into set of standards, if that makes sense, right? That like you switch between different Genesis child themes, but you always use this hook for modifying the main loop, right? Whatever that is. And like if you want to put something in the sidebar, like it's always this hook, right? And the CSS is all sort of logical built into that, right? And as somebody who doesn't know very much about themes, or Genesis, like basically not at all, I can jump into Genesis real quick and do something, right? Because it's a very standard thing and it's all pretty standardly laid out. And so I think that that type of approach to a new thing instead of a theme, somebody should do. I would love to do it. Again, it's a 24-hour in the day problem that I've come to accept begrudgingly. Right, and so I don't know if that's using something that's very simple like web components, or that's coming up with like a standard set of Angular bindings. And then, because potentially something like Angular, you could hand anybody a cheat sheet on bindings. And, right, explain to them how an ng repeater works, right? Like anybody should be able to pick that up pretty quick. And just have an invisible set of controllers that a more advanced developer could modify. Right, but if you handed it to them and you gave them the basic directives that they would need to use, like a show, hide, and maybe like a featured image directive, just do it. And I think that, and this is again where you get into that like Genesis analogy of you give people a standard set that they can learn that pattern very quickly, and and this is one of the great empowering things about WordPress. I don't look down at my nose at people who know less PHP than me. It's great that something like Genesis exists and lets people make their own website or become a professional implementer. And so I think that's the kind of opportunity that's going to open up. I don't exactly know how to do that right. But I think once the front-end stuff gets to be ubiquitous, I think that, I think people will make like REST API-powered themes, but I worry about that. I don't think it's a good fit. But I don't know. I could be wrong. It happens.
Not to be like looping back too much, but so when you announced your API course, I signed up like right away, and I almost kind of forgot about it until it was mentioned today. I was like, oh yeah, I paid for that.
You'll get it, Tom. Don't worry.
No, I'm looking forward to that. But around the same time that you had announced it, Tim Nash has also done a JSON API course, and I was like, oh yeah, well there's this course also. So I was wondering if you had a chance to take a look at Tim's and compare and contrast it all between them.
Nope. I have not. Roy C. Vaughn also has one that's specifically aimed at Angular that you should also check out. Buy them all. I think if you're if you're the kind of person who learns from videos, like it's an amazing value. Like my course is like $75. Like, and I forget what Tim started. It's something similar. I don't know. Like Roy's is part of Linda. Like, don't be cheap. Just buy them all.
Yeah.
And I'm serious. Like, I hear from people who ask me about writing, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know what to write about. Everybody's written about everything." And I'm like, first off, that's not true. But second off, even if somebody's already written about what you've written about, like there was a time where I would be like mad that somebody wrote a blog post about something. Like, how to do access WordPress. I was like, I did that 3 weeks ago, right? That was wrong. Because everybody learns differently. And this is really important to me because when I was a kid, I had terrible learning disabilities, couldn't read and stuff like that. And it's really important to me that we have in this community a large range of ways of learning.
Yep.
Because everybody's different, and for us to be as accepting and diverse as possible, we need to find ways of bringing in people who learn differently. And so, do you want to know the honest reason why I haven't watched Tim Nash's course? Is I don't learn by watching videos.
Okay.
I just don't. Like, I go to WordCamps to hang out, and like I went to like one talk at WordCamp New York that wasn't my talk. It was your boss Matt, and he did the rewrite thing, right?
Oh, you didn't go to my talk?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I don't believe it.
jeez.
But I sat the entire time digging through his code. I put in a pull request on the plugin he was talking about.
Yeah, he writes.
Because I can't learn anything from listening to him. And it's not about him. It's about the way that I learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was sort of paying attention to him, but I was mainly just reading the code because that's how I learn. And so one of the reasons why I write all this stuff and make videos is because I learn by explaining things.
Mm.
So it's really useful to me to make a course because it gives me an excuse to explain my screen. But I would never watch it, and because that's not how I learn.
Gotcha. You made a good point too, because like you said, everyone should buy it because it's not that expensive, and it's also a tax write-off. It's professional development, right? So buy all the courses, and it's a tax write-off. So that is the big plug for you right there.
Well, yeah, you should.
That's why you should have opened it up in December instead of January.
I know. Well, I mean,
I bought it back in December.
It's on sale.
I'm good.
And you got it at $75. I'm going to raise it to $100 once it comes out. So if you're watching this, you can go to joshfrest.net/REST-API, I think. I don't know. There's a pop-up.
We'll put a link in.
And you can buy my course at this discounted rate, and you'll get it in like a week or two, and then it'll be more expensive. So you can save money. But you should buy Tim's. You should. Roy did this thing on Linda. Watch them all because they're all going to be different. I don't know how different because I.
Yeah.
On that note, where else can people find you online?
Oh, I'm everywhere. You can go to Tom's website and find me. So joshpress.net is my website that I occasionally write stuff on. I try and write more. And I my Caldera WP. If you're interested in calderaForms, we have some other plugins, but there as well, the calderaForms, which you can check out for free on WordPress.org. So check out the WordPress plugins page. I've been on there like 20 times. And then Ingot is the simple A/B testing plugin that we've been building, which is really neat. And that's Ingot, INGOTHQ.com. So yeah, calderawp.com, IngotHQ. I'm Josh412 on Twitter. If you want to bug me, follow me.
Thanks, Josh. Where can we find you guys, Jason?
I'm at Rez. That's with 3 Z's, just about everywhere.
Cool. Bronson?
Cool. I'm at Bronson Quick on Twitter.
Right on.
And what about you, Tom?
I'm Tom Harrigan on Twitter. And make sure to go to wpdevtable.com/subscribe. Like, share, subscribe, iTunes, RSS, YouTube, all that other fun stuff. And be sure to check out all the past episodes on YouTube.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much, Josh.
Right. Thanks a ton, Josh.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Have a good evening, everyone.